Okay, Michael Engler, you directed the series finale of Downton Abbey, which of course is this show that is beloved by so many people. When you were directing this finale, did you think to yourself, God, I hope I don't screw this up? So,
Many, many times.
oh,
Before, during, and after, yeah. It's a big, definitely feel the weight of a legacy upon you to have a moment like that. It's a great opportunity, but for that reason, it's a little scary at times. But I enjoyed it, and I also felt like it was the whole finale, and everybody who worked on it with such a spirit of passion, playfulness, reverence, and so many. There was such a thorough approach to how it would go out, and everybody had such strong feelings about it that at the very least, I knew by the end that it wouldn't be unconsidered.
mm-hmm. So how did you get assigned to do it? I mean, you had directed 3 episodes of the series beforehand, but how did you get assigned to do the finale?
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I think they were happy with my work and what I brought to it, and I loved being there and being a part of it. But I couldn't exactly tell you. I mean, in a funny way, I think that's a better question for Liz Trubridge or Gareth Neame. I think in some ways, because there's so many terrific directors who worked on the show who would have done, a beautiful job. I don't know. I think in some ways, because I was a little bit of a wild card at first in coming in there as an outsider, I think maybe there was a little bit of a sense that that I wouldn't allow it to be sleepwalked through or ill-considered. Now, again, it's not that I think any other director who worked on that show would have done that, but I think there was a sense that maybe I brought an outsider's eye to it, and sometimes, especially that far along in a series, that can be a helpful thing.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about how you got to Downton, because I mean, I was just looking up some of your credits throughout television. You've done episodes of The West Wing, 6 Feet Under, Deadwood, Masters of Sex, Empire, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Sex and the City, and 30 Rock, both of which got you Emmy nominations. So that's a lot of stuff that's very different from Downton Abbey.
And they're all very different from each other, too. And that's one of the things I like most about directing and about the way my career's been able to go. I like doing a lot of different kinds of things. And also the difference between walking into a show that's up and running, none of those are shows that I did the pilot for. So, when you're going to freelance in a show that's been up and running, or even a new show that somebody else has set the style, what's interesting about it is figuring out exactly how that world works, and what those scripts need, what those actors need, and how to kind of live and understand the style and the vocabulary of the show, and at the same time keep it alive and hopefully help grow it. So it's not doing the same kinds of things over and over again, either within a show or from show to show. That's what interests me.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk some more about the finale. It's 2 hours. It's their annual Christmas special. A lot of stuff that you need to wrap up in this episode. Just talk about
Much.
Say what?
Too much.
Too much, yeah. Well, all these characters everyone loves, like Carson and Hugh Bonneville and everybody, right? So
Yeah.
talk about just juggling all of that in this 2-hour episode.
Well, I think partly because there's so many different people and stories to service, relationships and jobs and the sense of a future and all of that. I think the danger in it that we all felt was that it would become too broken up. This story here and this story there and this story there. And so one of the things we really focused on was trying to find all the links between the stories. So that Thomas's story is part of Mary and the Children's story, and the story of the house, which is also part of Carson's story, and Mrs. Hughes's story, and Robert's story, and that in any ways that we could weave those elements across each other, that was a big goal of ours, to make sure that it all felt like, even though you were seeing all these different completely unique separate storylines, that they all added up to something bigger and were part of something bigger, that nothing was ever just completely by itself. So you found more like groupings that related to other groupings. So, you know, Daisy and Mrs. Patmore and Mr. Mason and Andy, and, you know, the servants, and those overlapped with other servants and what they were dealing with. And then the upstairs has its own stories, and they overlap together, and they overlap with the downstairs in certain areas. So I think that was the idea, that we tried to make sure that as much as each individual story was being wrapped up, that it all, in the end, it felt like you had a sense of the whole. And that's why in the end we decided to end it the way we did. I mean, the very final images, which was the two groups separate, but together within each group, which is really the structure of that world. And then to pull away from the house and realize that what was contained within was really the whole story. And that was the end of that chapter within that house, upstairs, downstairs, everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the great things that this show has been able to do throughout its run, is it's given due balance to both the upstairs and the downstairs in this wide cast of characters. You know, no one gets shortchanged throughout it. Take us onto the set. You know, what was the atmosphere like shooting the finale? You know,
there was a real sense of poignancy about it. People were very aware of what an exceptional opportunity it had been and moment in their lives, whether they were the very youngest actors to the most experienced actors, and everything in between. They knew by the end of it, especially, that, you know, the likes of this would never come again. There may be other great successes, I'm sure that many or most of them will have, but that this was going to be something that would be its own piece of history, you know, theatrically. So I think, aside from that awareness, which made people feel very proud and very inspired to do their best work, there was also the sense that they had been so involved in each other's lives in such a meaningful way for so many years as actors, and promoting the show, and the crew, everyone on the crew, so many of them had been around for a long time, that there was a sense that let's enjoy this before it's over, and let's not take it for granted or each other for granted. So there was a real spirit of camaraderie and playfulness and sadness, and there were a lot of tearful goodbyes when somebody would shoot their last scene, and people really wanted to take the time to honor it and celebrate the contribution that each of them had made to it.
Mm-hmm. It is amazing to think that this show's, you know, run for 6 years. I mean, that any show can run for that long, you know, is sort of a miracle, right? You know, because so many shows don't even last past the first season. But, you know, what do you think it was about this show that resonated with people, I guess, so that it could continue? And
I think it was a couple of things that people love in any kind of a show, but that were combined in a particularly unique way. One is really great characters and really great actors, you know, and a lot of them, young and old, and you know, wise and foolish and everything. And so I think that part of it is just so rare to see, you know, like a first-rate acting ensemble of that scale is rare to see anywhere on any stage or screen or anything. And the writing was rare. I think for a genre like that, of that sort of British historical drama or upstairs downstairs kind of drama, the writing was so much more nuanced and complex, and it managed to both be a soap opera and yet have layers that most soap operas would never get to, of subtext and relationship and complexity. I think obviously there's the aspirational quality of seeing those houses, that way of life, those clothes, and a life that none of us will ever live or likely see again. But to see it in a way that felt personal and not just sort of Hollywood glamorized, that the relationship of each person to it, whether they were upstairs or downstairs, family member, servant, whatever, that each of them, because of where they were in the world, had certain limitations and certain opportunities. And you saw that each of them, how they dealt with that as an individual, had more to do with their happiness and success than the specific hand they were dealt. And I think that's something that resonates, especially with Americans, that the idea that you can be born rich, you can be born poor, you can have opportunities or not a lot of opportunities, about how you deal with it and how you develop your own character and sense of integrity is really what creates your place in the world, your value, your success, your ability to transcend. So I think that was obviously a big part of it. And I think it managed to have a really beautiful balance between the very dramatic and a kind of wonderful high comedy of manners. And there's not that many things that do that. I think that is one of the reasons I was asked to come on, because I have both a background in comedy and drama, and they always wanted people who could bring both of them alive.
Right. And you came in on the fifth season, right?
Right.
That was what was your experience like coming into the show that deep into the run?
A little terrifying at first. But I got over it quickly, because I have to say the cast, the crew, Julian, the producers, could not have been more welcoming, more empowering, just generous spirited. And I think we're happy to have somebody, like I said, who came in with a different point of view, looking at it from the outside and bringing a different perspective to it. They considered that a gift and not something that threatened them or seemed unhelpful or irrelevant in some way.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about tearful goodbyes from the cast. Was there ever a moment when you were shooting a particular scene where you thought, boy, I'm going to miss doing this show, or something that really, some scene in it that really spoke to you and kind of drove it home for you?
There were a few. There was one when Douglas Reith, who played Lord Merton, was telling Isabel Crawley, Penelope Wilton, that he had pernicious anemia, which in those times was fatal, that he thought that's what he had anyway. And she, being a nurse, knows what that is and understands that it's kind of a death sentence. And there's this moment where he says, in the most sort of brilliant of what I think Julian does best, where it's not mawkish or maudlin or sentimental, and he says, that's all right. I've had a good run. I've had a family and had a good life, done some things, seen the world. He says, I should have liked to have been married to you, but one can't have everything in life. And he said it was such a sort of loving, gentlemanly, unself-pitying moment. And I thought, there's a kind of grace in a nobility like that is very rare, that made me very emotional. And then the very last scene we shot was the servants having their toast at midnight and starting to sing Auld Lang Syne, and just the awareness that whole company of people who I really grew fond of and were very, very fond of each other. They were like their own family. Singing Auld Lang Syne to each other, knowing it was the last time they'd all be together. They all got quite emotional, and it was hard not to get caught up in that. But the funny thing is, it wasn't it wasn't the same for me as it was for them. I mean, they had been on that journey from the very beginning, and while it was meaningful for me, to say the least, I didn't feel like it was my show saying goodbye. I was happy to come on board and be part of it, and proud to be a part of it. But for moments like that, I mostly just stood back and let them share it with each other, because they had been through so much more together than, long before I had come into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a strange situation, especially coming toward the end and then doing the finale, where it's like, this group of, world-class athletes running a marathon. And then at the very end, they hand you the baton to run the last lap when they've already, created this amazing sensation. So I felt pretty lucky to be handed something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I want to talk a bit about your background and how you made the move into television, because you started out as a stage director before making the transition to television. Can you talk a bit about that and making that transition?
Well, I had been working in the theater for a while in New York. I live in New York, and several people, I had been interested in filmmaking and television. Television wasn't nearly as interesting at the time in general, but I was interested in, as a director, in learning to work on film, seeing if I liked it, seeing if I was any good at it, seeing if I had anything unique to bring to it. And it was around that time that some people started asking me if I was interested in working in television. It seemed like a good way to try and to learn and to see if I was good, to test the waters. So I was invited by some people to come and observe on some television shows, and I did that. And then I did some, I sort of realized I definitely, there was a lot about it that didn't come naturally to me, and I needed to spend some time sort of studying it and examining it. So as I was beginning to do that, my first work in television, I was taking, I went to Panavision and took a class in just exactly how a movie camera works and what it does and what lenses do and all of that. And then I just slowly started to ask friends of mine, questions that I felt would be helpful, people I knew who worked in film and television. So, but television is a good way to learn how to work on film. Because you can often walk in as a director of an episode and so many things have been figured out that in a way you don't have to figure them out. You just have to sort of figure out how they got that way and why they are that way and how to keep that alive. And so you have a lot of help and a lot of knowledge that's been, blazed before you.
Mm-hmm. And for your work, you've been nominated for 2 Emmys, one for 30 Rock, one for Sex and the City. We're right back in the middle of Emmy season again, building up to the nominations. So I'm just curious what that kind of recognition means for you in your work.
Well, it means a lot. I mean, especially nowadays, there are so many shows and so many things. I often don't, I'm sort of always amazed when anything like that happens. That it's hard to stand out in such a crowded field. It felt amazing. I felt proud to represent the shows that I worked on, and that people felt in some way my work on it was distinguished, even on a distinguished show. So that was pretty great. Part of it, I have to say, is a little bit the luck of the draw, which is when you get a great script on a great show. I mean, every episode, every TV show, even the biggest hits, they have their more exciting episodes and they're more groundbreaking, or just everything seems to come together. In the characters, the storytelling, the story itself. And I think with those 2 that I was nominated for, and then the shows that I've been nominated for the DGA award, similarly, I feel like when I read those scripts, I thought, oh, that's a very special example of this show. And and often on those things, the writer got nominated, 1 or 2 of the actors got nominated. So it's not that I don't think I had anything to do with it, but I certainly wouldn't claim full credit for it. But it means a lot also in the fact that because there are so many people who do what I do in directing episodic television, you do have a few minutes anyway where people say, oh, that's who that is. Okay, I've heard that name. Great. I know who that is. Maybe he'd be good for this. Would you read this? What do you think about that? You know, people who might not have before.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work on the finale of Downton Abbey, and thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Now if only I could figure out how to turn it off.